But on the other side, the folks who say MLSs shouldn't have public websites, they don't have any data either. So we have brokers who say, geez, the MLS website competes with my website. And we have data from one market, and they're not really data, they're just a sort of anecdote, I guess I would say, from brokers in Cincinnati who said when the MLS took down its public website, their traffic jumped substantially. Now some of them claim like a 3-fold increase in traffic, right? Well, the only problem with that is that that means that they got more traffic as a result of the MLS website shutting down than the MLS website itself ever got. Okay? Does that make any sense? That doesn't seem possible, does it? No, probably not. So I think there's stuff going on there. I mean, that was a hard-fought situation. There was actually a lawsuit. Some brokers sued the MLS saying you can't shut down the public website. So there's a lot of energy in Cincinnati. I don't think we can use that one anecdote to support the argument that MLS public websites compete with broker websites. Now here's a con that's sort of a con in some markets and not others. Some brokers say that MLS public websites can hurt broker sites because the MLS public websites are updated more frequently. Now this is true in some markets where the MLS vendor, for instance, provides a kind of packaged public MLS website that actually does real-time access to the MLS data. I don't know, does you guys offer a product like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the result there is that the MLS's public website is updated in real time. A broker who has a, well, hopefully not an FTP feed, but I guess there probably are some of your brokers who are still using an FTP feed for IDX. That's probably only being updated once a day. So in that case, I think the broker is in a position where they might be distressed that there's a better source of listing information on the web than the broker, and that's the MLS. Okay? But that's not true in all markets. There are certainly markets where the MLS says to the brokers, here's a live recipe. You can update your data. You can update your IDX site as often as you want. There are some MLSs that tell brokers you can actually not even make a copy of the IDX database if you don't want. When a consumer runs a query on your website, you can have a REST query hit the MLS database behind the scenes and display the data in real time to the consumer. In other words, you can give it have it be just as up to date as the MLS's public website. So this criticism from brokers is not really a criticism of public websites so much as it is a criticism of how MLSs implement them in some cases. We also have this argument that having a public MLS website uses dues from broker A to draw traffic to broker B's website. So the theory is that if broker A goes out and has a really effective web strategy, markets their website very effectively using traditional media, the MLS public website is undermining that and rewarding broker B, right? So if we have, let's say I'm a broker with 10% market share, but I have really effective marketing of my website. So I'm getting maybe, absent an MLS public website, I'm getting maybe 15% of the web traffic relating to real estate in my marketplace. First of all, I'm not sure how you measure that, but let's just assume that that's the case. Now the MLS launches a public website, and they start marketing it, and consumers who might otherwise have come to me, might have been part of my 15%, start going to the MLS. And I only get 10% of them back because I only have 10% of the market share. The rest of the leads that go to the MLS are getting distributed out to those other 90% of brokers who have done nothing to build a web strategy. So this is the argument that brokers are penalized, brokers who invest in the web are penalized by MLS public websites. Again, we don't have any evidence that this happened. We don't have evidence that it does or doesn't happen. So, actually a related point is that brokers argue that the MLS marketing its public website increases the costs for brokers to market their websites. And that's just an economics argument, right? You say, well, there's only so much ad space out there, display ad space in the newspaper, for instance, to promote a website. If the MLS is bidding for that space and I'm also bidding for it, it's going to increase the cost of the ad space. Supply and demand makes sense, right? Well, the only problem is that it doesn't take into consideration the fact that it's not just the MLS who's bidding against the broker for that marketing space, right? It's other brokers and it's other kinds of businesses. So once again, we don't really know what impact the MLS's efforts to market its website have on traditional brokers or on brokers' IDX sites. So here's my suggestion. First of all, I start by saying we shouldn't have a public website because if you're going to offer a member service, you ought to be sure that it's a member service first, right? So all services have to go through a vetting procedure, and if they don't meet the vetting requirements, they shouldn't happen. Then I would suggest, okay, what do we need to know in order to decide whether a public MLS website makes sense? Well, number one, let's try to gather some evidence about competition. Do public websites take traffic from brokers or portals or both? Number two, let's find out about consumer perceptions. Do public MLS sites engender consumer perceptions that broker sites are not trustworthy? If that's the case, we might want to hesitate to have an MLS public website, but we don't know. Number three, niches. In what context are broker websites unable to get traffic where MLS websites might be able to rescue consumers from sites like Zillow and Trulia? Let's just get some data. Let's find out what kind of website would actually deliver that benefit to the broker, and then evaluate it critically. And if, after you've done that, you conclude that it's possible for an MLS public-facing website to deliver benefits to your brokers, and if those benefits outweigh any costs or disadvantages, go ahead and do it. But then make sure you come back a little while later, a year or two down the road, and measure the results, and make sure that you actually are delivering those benefits. Because you will spend a lot of money on this if you're going to do it right. So you better make sure that the money is delivering the return that you think it's going to. And I think generally speaking right now, a lot of this discussion is happening in the absence of any kind of publicly available or publicly verifiable data. And that's endangering a good strategic discussion on the subject. In the meantime, I would say don't do a new MLS website deployment unless you have data to support the idea. I would suggest instead that you do something that you know works, and that is improve broker IDX capabilities. Make off-market data available through IDX. Why not? It's going to be available through BOWs now anyway. Make sure that IDX websites can have direct real-time feeds instead of getting once-a-day FTP feeds. Make sure that you're giving to IDX sites all the fields that you can. Why are you holding back fields from IDX if you're holding back fields from IDX? Make sure you have a rationale. If it's a field that should be treated confidentially, designate it as a confidential field, and don't send it to Realtor.com, don't send it to Trulia, don't send it to Zillow. If a broker can't display the field on her website, why should anyone else be able to display it? All right, so make sure that your brokers have a chance at least to be the best source of listing information on the web. And also you need to educate brokers to look at their own metrics. And Victor and I have talked a lot about this. There are just so few brokers who have a clue where the traffic to their website comes from. They don't know how to measure it, they don't know how to evaluate it, they don't know how to calculate a return on investment for their web efforts. If they're not doing that, they're not making good business decisions either. And a role that you can play, and even the brokers who oppose MLS public websites generally support this when I suggest it, the role the MLS can play is helping brokers understand how to assess the metrics that are available to them for their own websites. Because if the broker doesn't understand his own website, he's going to have a hard time understanding the role that your public MLS website is playing in his business. And then I would say work to identify tools that make broker sites more competitive. There's a lot of great ideas out there. And I'm not actually going to evaluate positively or negatively Bruce today, but the point is you've got a lot of people coming up with new ideas that may be very helpful to brokers. And ideally, you're going to look into information on those approaches, share that information with brokers, and help the brokers with information to make the right decisions about where to put their efforts. Maybe that's Roost.com, maybe that's some other kind of IDX website. And lastly, if you're going to syndicate listings, if you're going to provide listings on behalf of brokers to Trulia and Zillow and the like, make sure you do what's necessary to preserve the value of the metrics. So for example, I don't recommend that you syndicate data to cyber homes and then have a separate syndication deal with ListHub. And the reason is that if you do that, your ListHub statistics can be impacted, your ListHub linkback statistics can be impacted by the fact that you're syndicating separately to cyber homes. You've got to think about how these metrics will be useful to your brokers, and if you don't syndicate properly, you can require the broker to have to sit down with 3 or 4 different monthly reports on web traffic and try to make sense of them, as opposed to working with one partner like ListHub or Point2 to develop a strategy so that all that reporting is aggregated together and it's more comprehensible for the broker. All right, that's all I have to say.